Any tone can succeed any other tone. Any tone can sound simultaneously with any other tone or tones, and any group of tones can be followed by any other group of tones, just as any degree of tension or nuance can occur in any medium under any kind of stress or duration. Successful projection will depend upon the contextual and formal conditions that prevail, and upon the skill and the soul of the composer. Well, in the very early days, our family had a Cunningham player piano, and that's where I heard my first music. And when I was about 2, I had special favorites in these pieces. And I was very moved by this, and I felt that I'd love to speak to people, but not with words, but with music, and I wanted to bend certain phrases I heard another way, change them. And I asked for piano lessons. My first lesson, they gave me some kind of sheet with exercises on it, and I had no idea how you ever would write this music down that you hear. And here this thing was full of black notes with stems. And I said, oh, they're all 6s or 9s. That's easy. And I started out and immediately wrote out some of my own rhythmic phrases and melodic gestures. So I was writing, I guess, by the time I was 6, and I started in a local school, the Combs Conservatory it was called then. And one day, this is now when I was about 9, showed some of the things that I had done to Russell King Miller, and he is my real teacher, was my real teacher. He was in the college department, the upper school, but he was fascinated by this little kid, and I studied with him, let's see, between classes. I'd go over to the school, which was close by, and he had his conservatory classes. He would look at little harmony exercises and counterpoint exercises. And actually, I studied what is usually studied in college. Now, I wasn't precocious, it isn't that. But I studied the theory between 9 and 14. Well, for instance, we have a local orchestra here, which I happen to like very much. It's called the Philadelphia Orchestra. And I didn't know it was the greatest orchestra in the world, but I found that out now. Some people say I should say one of the greats, but I won't say that. And Stokowski was the conductor, and I was 10 or 11, and I would save 50 cents, very hard to save, and would take one work I was going to hear, go to the Logan Square Library, take out a score, and never listen to the record, never touch it on the piano, but study it. I spent all week studying that score to such an extent that I thought I had written it. I mean, I would envision what it would sound like. So when I went to the performance, I am in the peanut gallery with not much light, but my score, I would be all up nervous, and I would think, well, I think the flute's too low here. I can remember the first work I heard was a Rimsky-Korsakov, Scheherazade, and I was sure that couldn't sound. And I listened, and it did sound. And I found out why. Certain spacing, what's around it. And time after time, it takes not only weeks or months or years, I got to the point where I could think naturally for the orchestra. I studied piano to learn about music. I, at one point, studied with Fritz Reiner at the Curtis Institute. I graduated there in conducting. My object was not to have a conducting career. It was just to help me be the composer. I do conducting, but it's usually my music. Actually, I don't think a composer should want to be a composer. A composer should want to write music. And if you want to write music, then you should be a musician. And I've always been that way. I was a pianist in an orchestra when I was 11. The Women's Federation Music Clubs here in Philadelphia had an orchestra, and that was great training for me because the oboe wouldn't be there, or there wouldn't be trombones that night, or I would fill in the parts on the piano. And I had somehow acquired a good musical background, which doesn't make me a composer, but that made me was a musician able to write music down if I had ideas. And I've kept with it, you know. I'm still a young student as far as I'm concerned. I went to an art school because I was interested in art. In fact, a composer should be interested in almost all the arts because they're all connected. And I sculpt right outside of my house. There is one of my favorites, about a 4 or 5 footer in a sculptured limestone, which I call The Lovers. I write essays. I've just done a portrait of a couple of my colleagues, composers. And now I guess I use all of this kind of thing. That's all part of my music, I think. If I get kind of tired with a certain piece at a certain time of the day, you know, most composers are part human. You know, we get headaches, we get all kinds of things. Instead of taking a nap, I go to another medium, like sculpture. Then I can come back in an hour or two, refreshed and with a new perspective on my music. The people do say that I'm a prolific composer, and I think they get that notion from the number of works I've written. And that's okay with me, but they go one step further where it's not right. They say I write quickly and easily, and that is not true. I spend a lot of time on my music. I rewrite and sandpaper and chisel and throw out and eke out my music. So I know I have a lot of music, but it's all written slowly. For instance, I would never write something I don't want to write. I think I'm privileged that I have that kind of language to speak to somebody. I should not abuse it. And it should be meaningful and distilled. Music defines time, and if I take 20 minutes of anyone's time, I want it to speak with depth and density. See? And I want it to be not describing everyday life or paralleling anything that we have. I want to write about human behavior. Write about it, not try to duplicate it. It is very difficult to talk about my music because I just rather write it. Right now I'm in the middle of a great big piece. But there's some basic things that I've always strived for in my music. And I've had criticism. It's very strange. In the 40s, people thought I was too avant-garde and too dissonant, too wild for them. Then they thought maybe I was too conservative. And then they think that, oh, maybe my music has changed. It used to be very dissonant, now it isn't. And then other people say, oh, his music has changed. It used to be conservative, and now it's very dissonant. What it is not the middle of the road even. It's that my music contains, I guess, basically 2 elements. One that is kind of gracious and one that is kind of gritty, I call it sometimes. And I go from one to the other. And I've been all my life just amalgamating the different techniques. I've grown up with the serial way back when I was in my, before I was 10, as a matter of fact. And to the post-tonal, the neoclassic. And I found that there was no one of these elements that I could disregard. They were meaningful. But the pieces I like best that I do are the ones that combine those kind of evenly. They go in and out of dissonant, consonant, serial, whatever. And there's nothing in my music that's in any one piece that will have the critics rave about or get mad about. There's no, I don't break glass and throw, I don't go into the electronic, which I certainly like, but I don't get into that. I'm just, with the materials that we have inherited, I'm writing my music. And we haven't even begun, just about beginning to use what we've to use our inherited materials of the 20th century. I think the next century is going to be rich in this amalgamative kind of music. I found myself getting into teaching. As a matter of fact, the year I graduated from the conservatory here, Russell King Miller decided to die. I still hold it against him, but, you know. And he asked them, before I hadn't known this at the time, and he knew he was going to die, for me to take over the job. So I started when I was 20 or 21 as head of the composition and theory department of Combs. And I found that I wasn't teaching, I was sharing music with students, that I was learning from them. Hopefully they were learning something from me, and I found that very helpful in my life. That led to the Philadelphia Conservatory, Combs to the Philadelphia. That led to the Julliard School in New York, where we have the cream, not only of America, but from all over the world. I have one very special class, a fourth-year literature materials class. I love that because I have the violinists and the singers and the clarinetists. Everybody's in that class. But that main interest is focused on from Wagner up to the present day, on the literature. And what I'm trying to do, and some of my colleagues, is to make the equivalent with our own music, because we do have a meaningful music, and it helps the performers, and there are a lot of performers at Julliard that want to play and do play contemporary music. Whether they're encouraged or not by their major teacher, they still do this. And we have to get it past just the instinctive playing. We have to get them to understand what it's about so they can be then instinctively even freer. So I find this harmony book, which I didn't use when I first wrote because it bothered me, because I just want to be tied down. But in the last few years, I'm back to it with the students. It gives these people something to hold on to and makes the homework more urgent and focused. They can't get away with it, away with practicing so much. Most of them want to stay home and practice. If we did not have a rich literature, I would not have written the book. And I felt that I should clarify what we had, and I felt that we should find a way to amalgamate the various resources of this century, which composers by now are beginning to use in a new way. Every new piece doesn't have to be striking out into new territories. We've done enough of that in this century. It's time we amalgamate the resources and write our music. The book has nothing to do with my personal likes or dislikes. All I do is to say, this is what we have, this is how you use it, and it's, in a sense, almost a traditional book or a conservative book. But in the last few years, I have just this one L&M class that I talked about. That's a literature material class for undergraduates. And the rest of my work is a one-to-one basis with the composition majors. And I may have an 18-year-old right out of high school. I may have some people on the doctoral level. But the one-to-one basis, to me, is very rewarding. I'm with people that have something. It's not what I have. I try to find what they have and develop them. I don't have a routine of things where you have to learn this and learn. Obviously, you have to know everything about music and your counterpoint. And you must know what makes Bach tick and Brahms and Ravel, whoever. And the people of our time, we must know what Penderecki is about in his music. You can like it, you can dislike whatever you want to, but we have to know that. We have to know Schoenberg, early Stravinsky and late Stravinsky, and then the greatness of Alban Berg, you know. And if I have some students that don't have interest in Webern, well, there, as an important composer, if I say to them, they have the right to dislike Weber. In fact, I think they should dislike them more if they really dislike him, but they have to know what they're disliking. And I will assign them that kind of study. So with my students, I am helping them find what they are, and they are the result of all this music that I'm talking about. It's their business professionally to know this, though, not just have a general influence. I am always getting a new perspective from working with my students. Also, some of these students then, as they are there and growing, and some of them work to their master's degrees and doctorate degrees, I am there firsthand with a new important composer. I was very busy. I was studying conducting with Curtis, with Fritz Reiner. I was an organist with a large center city church. But a couple of weeks I had been giving a lot of recitals. I gave, in fact, 20 recitals in a period of time. And I was not prepared to take my lesson with Olga Samarov. But I went in and played a work by Johannes Brahms, Prelude and Fugue in A minor, that I had been playing on the organ at on those concerts. And I just arranged it for piano, just on the spur of the moment. And Madame Samarov said, I have a student who's going to give a town hall debut in 6 weeks. Give me a copy of this, because I want him to premiere it in New York. And I had to then tell her I hadn't written it down. I just made it from the organ. And that I don't believe in arrangements for the piano, because the piano has such a rich literature. I'd arrange something for harp or maybe viola where the literature wasn't so rich. And then she said crossly, do it. So next week I came in with the whole thing written out. And her pianist, Eugene Liszt, premiered the thing in New York. And the prominent, the first New York critic there, the big fellow, wrote a complimentary review on Brahms's. It said Brahms-Persichetti, right? Of course, I was unknown. Brahms is tremendous, and he went on arrangement of the great piece by the 17th century composer Persichetti. Thinking I was Pergolesi or something, I don't know. Well, a couple of my publishers here in Philadelphia and one in New York called me the next day, because that was, Alkenvogel called me, so they wanted to see this piece. Well, I brought that in with one of my piano sonatas. And this is how I got published. And the piano sonata, which they published by some fluke, got on a contest list. So in 3 months, it sold out the whole edition. But this is how I got started in publishing. And this now was in the early 40s. Eventually, in 1952, the firms separated. Mr. Alcon went on his own way. And they needed somebody to direct the publication program there. And I was invited. It led up to being director of publications in 1952 of Alkenvogel. And that's where my publishing career, I guess, started. And a lot of my music, it got so that some of my music sold very well for them, and it's been a nice, warm relationship. The firm now is part of Theodore Presser Company. This is a kind of a rare thing for a composer to be that close to a publishing firm. And I'm not an editor. I don't actually do that kind of work. It's listen to music and make recommendations. It's the kind of thing I do normally anyway, just listen to new music. Now, my wife happens to be a great pianist and a great person, and the joy of my personal and musical life. But I had a scholarship with Olga Samarov at the Philadelphia Conservatory. As a matter of fact, that's how I met my wife, because Dorothea and I tied for the scholarship, and I had to split that with some girl from Kansas, And I didn't notice her for a while. I was a little disturbed by that, One day I looked at her, and we were married. Apropos of Dorothea, as our life went on, we had all kinds of musical interests in common, and one was music for four hands, and we were both pianists. Now, for some reason, we thought we liked the four hands, one piano, better than the two piano, and we gave many recitals of music, not arranged now for one piano, four hands, but music written for that medium. And she's probably helped me, well, I'm sure, more than any other human, Now, turtles and doggies and birds have helped me in a different way, but as far as humans go.
I feel about Vincent Persichetti, I think the way most wives who love the person they've lived with for a very great long time, that we all do. That we have disagreements, we argue about small things, especially about small things, never about big things, and that we're madly in love. And it sounds terribly old-fashioned and kind of corny, but it's true. It's been quite a long time now, and we're still learning to know each other. And I think that we value each other as separate people, but we are, I'm afraid, a little too Siamese twinish. But we are responsible to each other, and it's fine.
I wanted a place with a little bit of land, but within a block or two of Carnegie Hall. Well, but somebody from the Philadelphia Orchestra Board, a friend of mine, showed me the house that I live in now. That was an old colonial dairy farmhouse. No sign of civilization whatsoever, excepting some very smart raccoons who we know by their first names, fox, and those 6 deer, and there are others. If I'm asked about why do I live in Philadelphia, I guess I just freak out because there's so many things I can't think of any reason why I shouldn't live here. The scrapple's good and the cream cheese is good. I was born in Philadelphia, and there's so many things have happened here, all my early things that I've never even thought about where else I would want to live. It's not that I like Philadelphia better than Pittsburgh or Colorado Springs. It's just, this is my hometown. And I just like Philadelphia. This is just out of respect to my friend, Benjamin Franklin, maybe. I just don't like to talk about it too much because those of us who are natives want to keep it a secret. I travel around the country, and preferably by car, because I use my car to give me more time for my writing. That may sound a little twisted. Whatever it is, it's worked fine. And people ask me, you write in the car? You know? Yeah, of course I do. That's the freest time. I have nothing to think about. And in my car, I have automatic pilot and power steering, so nothing to do. Just sit there. And I don't sit there for 3 hours writing notes down. I'm thinking, and then I have a pad I put on the steering wheel to make certain indications to remind me what I was doing. In the evening, there are little white, usually small, rectangular shaped things they're called motels, and I can stop there and write it down.
In his travels, I think he's doing a thing that's very, very important for any musician, and that is to make contact with people. And the traveling that he's done and that we have done together has been part of the thing about his caring very much about music and how it grows in this country, and about this country itself, and about the earth. And he's doing less of it But he's done it for so many years and for such a long time. And I think this is what is very good for a composer, to feel part of the world, because you can get so isolated up there in that studio with just those notes.
And I still don't think of myself as teaching or being a composer. I'm just busy in music. And writing is the best way I like to communicate with people. And we only have, 16, 17 years left for 20th century music, you know. I lose sleep over this sometimes. The other night I woke up and I realized that. And I remember at that time I was so kind of weary, I forgot how to make a treble clef. You know what I did? I just went back to sleep.
Vincent Persichetti, a 20th century composer, is made possible in part by a grant from the